keep it all in one thing, and we can spread the good word of our series. So please, if you're not connected with Howard Diesel on LinkedIn, do yourself a favor and follow the man. And DMSA and Modelware Systems. If you would like to talk about anything that is sensitive, you can either talk about it on the webinar recording and just let me know and I can edit it out, or wait until the end and Howard Diesel will be happy to speak to you afterwards.
Can we talk about JG?
You can talk about JG. I'm sure his ego will be fine. And then the presentation deck will be released at the end of the series. So wait until the end of the month and we can send that your way. Then next. Amazing. So all our webinars in May. Today is for data management managers. Every Friday in May, we will be doing our CDMP Q&A with Veronica Diesel, and she will take you through the whole CDMP certification process, tips and tricks, how to do the online exam, everything you need to know to get you ready to certify. On the 9th, we have the ins and outs of data modeling. That is with Mark Atkins. It will be at a different time from what we normally present it at. It will be at 8 a.m. South African time, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's the writing business definitions with Mark. So, Mark, we'll make sure we get a recording for you, sir.
Mark, if you were a true fan, you would be waking up.
You don't want to tease me about sleep, even though I'm living clean. I'm still not sleeping enough. So you never know. I might show up at one of your midnight seances.
Who knows? Let's see. Alrighty, and then on the 11th we have data protection, data privacy with Carolyn Mutton. I don't know if we have a topic yet for that, but it'll be
sorting it out on Friday, Debs.
Incredible. So that will be on data privacy. On Thursday, we will be speaking to data citizens. Everyone can learn, so please join. On the 16th, we have the big data and data science. That will be a topic will be uploaded shortly. 17th is data ethics and data culture with Christine and Costa Iotis. And then on the 18th, we have the DMSA user group. I know we have Gary talking
Alaman.
Yes. Something around metadata. And yeah, after that, we've got data management professionals and then the data executives the following Thursday. So please pull through. All our events are on our Meetup group and you can register for them all in advance. Next slide, please.
Wow.
Yay, training in May. So if you would like to become a DAMA certified data management professional, we host our data management fundamentals course with Veronica Diesel. That's over 4 days. We are having it twice in May, which is not usually what we do. We usually have it only 1 week in the month. So if you want to squeeze in, we can still get you in from the 9th to the 12th. Otherwise, from the 16th to the 19th, there are many slots available. Please contact me, Debbie Diesel, if you'd like to know more about that, and I'll send you all the information for that. And it happens every month. So if you can't make it in May, we can get you sorted for a following month. And in June, we have the data management certification, CDMP certification from the 20th to the 23rd. And we have how to govern data with Howard Diesel. And that will be over 5 days to get you ready for the specialist exams of data governance. So yes, that is our calendars. Please contact me if you need anything. Thank you so much. Over to you guys.
Okay, so yeah, I'd just like to share with everybody. This is Don. I'm sure you've heard a few of his comments. He has presented before, and this was 9 hours ago. Don produced one of these graphs. I think that was a very interesting graph. So please follow him. And all of this comes from his platform. So he will be sharing on this existing platform that he, Byron, and Rousseau have built. Okay, so if you guys are interested, I enjoy looking at it every morning, and the first step is improving my data literacy in terms of what does this graph mean, and the second step is, well, how does it apply to the world that we live in? I remember commenting on Canada and South Africa were doing really badly in terms of our speed at which we were operating our docks, if I remember correctly. So Don, thank you very much. Thanks to you guys. Over to you. You can take the screen.
Fantastic. Thank you, Howard. I'm just getting my slides ready. Excellent. Fantastic. So just apologies in advance if I'm a little bit slow today. I've got COVID, so Byron, please jump in if I'm not coherent at times.
This must be a Kadira thing. So all of you guys picked up COVID and Kadira.
Yeah, it must be.
Why was it didn't
Let me just turn that off, Don. I'll just
Okay, no
go on
problem.
mute. I'll just send him on mute.
Okay, excellent. So today we're going to talk about the EconData as a use case for a data manager, thinking about how to productize your data. So Howard's already in previous presentations spoken about the different personas. Today we're going to be zooming in and thinking about how to think about the EconData value proposition from the perspective of a data manager. So just by way of introduction, today we're going to talk about economic data. And one of the key challenges in using economic data, particularly in larger institutions, is that economic data comes from a variety of different sources. On the one hand, you can get official data that's in the public domain. You can get third-party data from specific data providers, or some institutions might have their own internal economic data. And typically, those types of data are often in different data formats and different forms. And as a result, it can be really difficult to create a central store of economic data for use for data management on the one hand, but also for use by data professionals. So this is the key challenge that EconData overcomes. It centralizes internal and external economic data. It's based on an SDMX information model, which, as we'll discuss a little bit later, has become a standard that's widely been adopted internationally by many statistical agencies and large institutions. And it's also being open source. There's been a range of different free open source software tools that have become available, but also commercial products that enable that make SDMX easier to use and enable more usability of SDMX-based data. So one of the other key things about EconData is that it improves access to South African public domain data. It makes that data discoverable, and it puts it in a time series format that makes it easy to use on an ongoing basis. And so it's part of the data democratization paradigm to make data more easily accessible and enable users to use such data with whatever tools they wish. And then lastly, the SDMX model has implicit in it a requirement to define what constitutes as valid under the standard. And so what that does is it provides a bunch of really valuable data management and governance, provides a number of valuable attributes, and enables repeatable processes to be made easy to automate and update. And so from the perspective of a data user, it also enables users to automate processes that depend on data. So before I start talking about the specifics of the value proposition, I'm just going to zoom in on three concepts that are important to understand in the context of economic data. So I'm going to talk about the importance of definitional consistency. I'm going to just say a little bit about the SDMX standard, and then I'm going to talk about data democratization as well. So first off, for decisions to be made, you need access to the right information, and you need to understand what the right information is. And that can become quite difficult when you are dealing with a high volume of data from a variety of different sources. So you need to be able to identify inconsistencies between the data and address those. For many regulated firms or industries, it's also really important to understand what data is housed in specific places and how that data is used. And so there's also increasingly reporting requirements associated with economic data. Now, I've tried to highlight on the slide that there are high-level concepts that are really important from an economic perspective. But you can often have different definitions of those high-level concepts. And what's really important is for different concepts to be defined in a way that can be understood, and the relationships between different concepts to be understood as well. It's also really important to understand the source of the different economic concepts. And for some concepts, one might have authoritative sources. So, for example, for GDP, gross domestic product, there's an official estimate from produced by Statistics South Africa, but there may be lots of other supplementary measures of economic activity that may be of interest. So one would want to know what the sources of those data might be. It's also really important to understand in an economic context what the frequencies of the different data are, given that the frequencies could be daily, monthly, quarterly, etc. And what type of transformations have been applied to the data. Have they been seasonally adjusted, etc. Also, it's often the case that there could be different security classifications associated with economic concepts. Some series might be confidential, and it would be important for any data management system to be able to flag that for individual series. And an important other aspect of economic time series is that many time series are revised, which means that data vintages become very important. So if you want to ultimately build models that use economic data, it can be very important to have stored versions of data that was available at a specific point in time before the data were revised. Lastly, it's also very important to be able to assess the quality of different economic time series. And ideally, data management systems need to be able to help a user identify the quality associated with a specific time series.
Sorry, Don.
Yes, Howard?
Could I ask a question there?
Yes, of course.
And certainly I'm sort of asking on behalf of some of the other data management people. I like your term there, definitional consistency, and one can certainly see it's a lot more complex than just the common definitions of what does a balance sheet mean, or what does every single line item on the balance sheet mean. It actually talks about lots of interrelationships and then the sources and the publications of it as well. So, I mean, I'm just guessing, for example, a balance sheet, there could be a very different definition between a daily balance sheet and a month end or an end of month balance sheet, end of year, end of period. Those things could be quite different. And the structure may be the same, but they're very different time series, I'm assuming.
That's right. And users would ultimately might want access to all of those different versions of those concepts. So you need to be able to distinguish between I think let's take perhaps a good example would be factors of production would have relationships between, say, capital and labor and output. Those would be, those concepts are related to each other, but also separate. Right. And you could also have different definitions of each of those concepts. And ideally, you'd want to be able to have access to different measures of capital, different measures of labor, different measures of output, as well as knowing which ones are the official measures that are produced by the statistical agency, for example.
Okay. So that's sort of where you're talking about that data provider in terms of the authoritative source. So who's responsible for publishing that measure?
That's right. But in the context of economics, there's always a debate about whether different data sources give you the same picture of what is happening, because there may be one preferred, commonly preferred data source. So in the case of, say, GDP, the official statistical estimate provided by the statistical agency, but there may be many other indicators of economic activity that are available from other sources, perhaps on a higher frequency, that could give a read on what's happening at the moment. And so there's this ongoing discussion about what is giving you the true read of what is happening, given that even that GDP concept that's published officially will be revised in future. So there's always uncertainty over even the official data sources.
Right. And I see Manja's got a question. She's asking, so even though there's an international standard, it's very context specific.
That's right. These issues will be different in different economies and at different times. So what's from a data management perspective, what's really important is the ability to understand what the differences are between the different data definitions, the different concepts. And as we'll show a little bit later when we actually start showing you what the data structures look like, that'll become a little bit clearer.
And just the last question, in terms of a vintage, I mean, I know when I first saw that, I wasn't sure. It's like a wine vintage, right? 2011, 12. Okay.
And in economics, typically the newer vintages are the better ones. It's not the old ones.
Right. Okay, cool. All right. JG, have you got that?
Well, I'm disappointed that the economics data couldn't keep up with wine, but I'm happy to find another way.
Cool. Thanks, Don.
Okay, excellent. So let me just talk a little bit about SDMX. We've had a previous session where we talked a lot about SDMX. So I'll just do a brief overview. So SDMX is an international standard, and it's become and the reason it's become a standard is because it provides a common way of structuring not just data, but also metadata. It's been widely adopted. The list of statistical agencies, large multilateral institutions, and other big institutions that have adopted it is too long to put on a slide, but it covers many of the largest official data providers in the world, such as Eurostat, central banks like the ECB, the Bank for International Settlements, which is the central bank of central banks, multilateral institutions like the IMF and OECD and the World Bank and others. And there are a number of features of the SDMX information model that are really attractive from a perspective of users and producers of data. From a perspective of users, the standards provide a standard for web-based dissemination, which makes data machine readable and then makes it easy to update databases that draw on data that's provided by major data providers. It also allows internally within an organization you to combine information from different data sets. So different data databases might have different data structures and might have different content, which makes it really difficult to actually integrate into a single data set. Now, under the SDMX information model, it is possible to couple different databases, facilitating exchange of data between data sets. Now, what's also, so it's not just attractive for sharing data across institutions, but also within institutions. And as we'll show, the model also has a bunch of features that are embedded in it that are really attractive from a data management and governance perspective, because they are baked right into the information model. It also makes it really easy to document the processes involved in constructing data sets, in updating data, and in managing them. So here's a diagram that just describes how SDMX's information model works in practice. So you are able to combine data from different internal and external data sources. And as we will show you later, the key challenges in converting data that might be in different outlays and different structures, and converting them into a common structure that can be made machine readable and therefore loadable into a database. Now, another really attractive feature of SDMX is that its data registry enables you to store specific artifacts that are related to the data and their metadata, without actually storing the actual data in the registry or the reference metadata in the registry itself. In the case of external data providers, these will be stored in the data provider's systems themselves, or if by way of example. So what that means is that you can create a way to map data from different data sources in a way that can be integrated into a new database and can be queried to enable a user to see what data is available and to already interact with that data by querying a web service. And as we will discuss shortly, the SDMX information model provides a way to attach a lot of detailed metadata to data. So that's explanatory information that describes the data content, the methodology associated with the construction of the data, and features of the data, such as the quality of the data. Okay, so just a little bit on metadata. So under the SDMX information model, the metadata structure definition defines the reference metadata that is collected or reported for the concepts that are being managed. And that describes how they relate to each other and how they are presented. So, for example, what this describes would be the dimensions of the data, the types of variables that are in the data set, and things like a code list. So a code list would be, from the official data providers, a code list might be something like this: official statistical classifications under specific for specific types of data, like the national accounts. And the reason this is valuable is that it creates a way to attach metadata that uses that uses find really important, such as being able to see when the data was published, who the data provider for a specific series is, and it also provides a neat way to classify data for reporting and publication purposes. So it enables you to distinguish which types of data might be writable or readable by different types of users. It also makes it easy to construct taxonomies that describe groups of data flows or different groups of metadata for reporting purposes if you're a data manager.
So sorry, Don. Are we then saying that if we have a common, what you refer to as that definitional consistency, and we map to our whatever time series we build, if we map to the right concepts and the concept schemes, as we add that time series or that SDMX data set to the registry, that has been automatically cataloged. I'm assuming that that sort of process, if everyone's being consistent about it, we should be able to get that automated cataloging happening, and then we don't need to go through this whole process at the end of, oh shucks, where does this guy fit in, and then get someone to catalog it for us.
That's absolutely right. So the advantage of doing it this way is you do that, you decide on the structure once, and it enables that automation that you've described, which is incredibly important from the user perspective, because that means that you can actually automate the processes that run off this kind of data. And from the data manager's perspective, is incredibly important because it eases that. It eases not just the burden of that you've described, but also the updating burden. It's just it becomes much easier to update data in the data set once you've gotten the data structure right. Byron, do you want to weigh in on that, or do you think have I done enough?
Yeah, no, I think what you've said covers most of what Howard was asking. So yeah, the idea is that you define these concepts and metadata once, and then they are the source of truth for all data going into the database henceforth, right? And then there's two, I suppose, aspects to the data consistency, right? So the registry provides internal consistency, but you can also share these metadata structures between registries. So you can import all of the, say, OECD's concepts and code lists, so that you are not duplicating concepts, and this makes the data intelligible amongst or between organizations, further to just being internally consistent, right? There can be global consistency if people work together.
And Byron, one of the things I did after talking this morning is I went on to the Fusion and the SDMX format that was published here on the web page, and the guys actually said that a new version is coming in SDMX 3 where they have more of that mapping and concept map. There's not just structures map, but concept maps as well. So that seems to be very powerful in that ability to navigate and understand the relationships between these concepts.
That's correct, yes. So SDMX3 has now been finalized, but the implementation is not 100% complete yet. But it's bringing in a whole raft of new features and standards. So yeah, it's quite exciting. It specifically addresses new kinds of data like geolocation data and also data transformations. It specifies a whole language called VTL, but we can get into that another time perhaps.
And also when I was looking at the value taxonomy for data products, there was an SDMX set of namespace references there as well. So all these different attributes, one can start labeling the value of a time series if necessary.
That's correct, yes.
Thank you.
Excellent. So the other appealing aspect of the SDMX information model is that it has several features that are really useful for controlling reporting and publishing, because the structure defines what is allowable and attaches that to that definition to, for example, user allowances, making specific subsets of the data viewable or writable. And so it defines explicitly who is responsible for the provision of the data, and you can link a data set in question to a specific data provision agreement. Now, this, as a result, is really useful for the governance process around data management. It also is useful to be able to constrain the scope of the data or metadata that can be supplied to a specific user, while still enabling users from the entire organization, however that is defined, to be able to see what the contents of the data set, the full database is, and to understand what the metadata associated with specific series might be. And so this is important from a data sharing perspective, because it enables the responsible sharing of data in a way that is really difficult to achieve if under some legacy data management approaches.
And maybe, Don, that maybe we had a challenge in the central bank, or there's a reserve bank, where no one could see a vintage or a time series before it was sent to the IMF, and there was almost an agreement with the IMF. Only once that had been sent was it then available. It then became public domain. That was we battled quite a bit in terms of almost the access control was dependent on the age or the sign of the time series. I don't know if something like this could handle that type of requirement.
Byron, do you want to weigh in on this one?
Yeah, it most certainly could. So you could have two data flows to the same underlying data, and they could be constrained in different ways. And then through the sort of publication subscription mechanism of the data model, you would publish those data flows at different times, okay, to allow that differentiated access.
Okay, great, thank you.
Excellent. So just a little bit on data democratization. Now, this has been a global phenomenon that's gathered pace over recent years, which is about trying to make data globally, but also within institutions, more timely and equitably accessible. So the goal of data democratization is to allow non-specialists to be able to gather and analyze data without having to seek permission first or require help from an IT specialist, for example. Now, data sharing of that kind of type only works if you have a standardized format. And so this is really why SDMX is so valuable in this context. Because as we will show shortly, in our example with EconData, is that you can create a common understanding of the data by having conceptual definitions that are clearly defined, and by having a data catalog that enables users to actually discover data that's in a database and see the associated metadata. Now, so as a result, it really is it's one example of how you can achieve data as a data as a service and achieve and empower users to actually directly interact with data. Important, as we will show you as well, is that EconData enables the automation of the processes that run off data. So if you build dashboards or models that use data, you can automate those because of the features that that are embedded in the platform. And lastly, because as we've already discussed so far in the presentation, because the SDMX model is evolving over time to meet the requirements of the data science and official statistical agency community, it means that over time, not just the model itself, but all of the toolkits and both the open source and commercial toolkits that are available that enhance the functionality of the SDMX model evolves over time. And so it's not a static information model. It's getting better and better over time. And as a result, there's also not the kind of tool lock-in that you might have with other ways of doing things. So a user that uses the data can bring a different tool to the data to analyze it in whichever way they would like. And we will show you an example of that shortly. Okay, so this is these are some of the key things that EconData addresses. And in particular, the challenge in the South African context is that public domain data is available from a variety of different providers in a variety of different forms. And that's true of each individual type of data as well. So just to give you a sense of the type of challenge that one has if one wants to automate the availability of public domain statistics in South Africa, you would need to load data from individual spreadsheets loaded onto specific websites for specific concepts. If you look at the annual financial statistics from Statistics South Africa, for example, you can see that you have different industry classifications, and these are in a different hierarchy. But you can see that they are the text. One needs to be very careful with how it's loaded because it's loaded. It's it's not necessarily because it's not necessarily always in a strict hierarchy. And then you need to be able to account for the fact that there are different data classifications, so different industry classifications, and that there are different concepts run across the different industry name and industry classification. And then this is only for a specific snapshot in time. So this is only for a specific year. Now, what EconData does, because of the way that the data definitions have been structured, we have set up the ability to download the underlying data in the right format, create time series of the individual concepts at the individual industry level, for example, over time, and that this can be updated as the new data comes out. And so you actually avoid all of the repeated work that would be necessary if you were a user and having to do this yourself. And so EconData centralizes all of the important public domain data that's available in South Africa and incredibly hard to wrangle given the way that it's presented. So even though the data's in the public domain, it's incredibly difficult to use in practice. And as we will show you shortly, EconData makes it trivially easy to access time series of data that otherwise would look static. So we will show you shortly what the actual repository looks like. But just a brief note on the actual metadata that EconData attaches to series. So individual series are given a data key that's consistent with the provider data keys as far as possible, and also provide details on the categories of the data, the specific definitions of the data that depend on the source of the data, the frequency of the data, and other definitional issues that are relevant to specific series. And these are set out in the data structure definitions that Byron will show you shortly. Now, the EconData registry is really important as a result because it provides detailed metadata associated with individual time series. Now, this not only ensures the definitional consistency of series over time, but it enables a user to compare concepts that are in the data set. Now, it also makes it easy for quality checks to be applied, and it means that any data that is loaded is valid according to the definitions that have been applied. This also means that you can, because of the implicit way that the SDMX structure uses, it means that there is a codified process to the definitions and the loading of data, which is useful from a data management perspective. And I think I've spoken to the other issues, but we'll demonstrate them shortly. And then just the last word on why this is ultimately so important from a data as a service perspective. And the reason is that it enables users who want to access the data to use whichever tool they wish to use. And the EconData platform provides an API that enables users to programmatically access data. Now, this means that you can actually update any process flow that you have that depend on South African economic data. And importantly, there are tools available that make it possible for you to interact with SDMX-based data, with whichever tool you would wish. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Byron, unless there are questions ahead of us doing a demo.
Don, one of the questions I had was, you mentioned that I, as a user, a citizen, could compare concepts, look for series with similar concepts. So is this sort of use case right to say, oh, well, I'm using this time series, what other time series could I use that has a similar set of economic concepts that I'm looking for, and you could find other ones that are describing it in a different way? Is that this sort of use case that you would use it in?
That's certainly possible using if one uses an SDMX model. It's not functionality that's currently available in EconData, but it's certainly something that we would look to add. But absolutely, that is possible.
Right.
Yeah, and I think some of the demonstration will cover that. So let's get into it. I see we're running out of time as well. So. All right, good afternoon, everybody. So I'm going to try and make some of the concepts that Don spoke to a little bit more concrete. Don, just to confirm, you can see my screen clearly?
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
Perfect. Okay, great. So we're going to look at the registry from the point of view of a human user. And we're going to start with the broad category schemes. So this is now a user that is looking to discover data, right? So at the sort of highest level, we've got here the Basel regulatory reporting category scheme, and then we've also got the statistical subject matter domains from SDMX. Okay, so now we can just click on that to see what it is. And you can see here's a description of what Basel is and how it pertains to bank regulation. And then also just to show you briefly, although we are looking at it from the point of view of a user, any of the structures within this registry are absolutely machine readable. And all the, as we drill down, all the references between the different structures are also discoverable programmatically. Okay, so let's view this category scheme. And then we can see the different categories within the scheme that are available are the different BA forms. So we've got the BA 100 series through to the BA 900 series. And you can see for the BA 100 series, we've got a number of linked structures here. So let's say, for example, we were interested. Okay, so again, there's a description of what the BA 100 is. If we were, so the BA 100 series encompasses the BA 100 and 120. And then you can see there are different versions of the data sets. Let's say we were interested in the BA 100 version 1.2. Now that takes us to our data flow. If we view the data flow, we get a whole bunch of information. All right. So the first thing to notice on the left-hand side are the different concepts that are related to this data flow. So we've got the dimensions of the data, which are the searchable attributes that make up a time series. So any combination of bank aggregation line and time period constitute a unique series. And then we've got additional attributes of the series, which are just further attachments. And then depending on which of these concepts you click on, you will see that they are also enumerated. So these are the possible values that that concept can take on, and that's known as the code list. All right. We can also see who are the providers of this data. So for this particular data set, we've got the South African Reserve Bank as being the provider. And we can also see that on this particular concept, there are no restrictions on this code list. So you are able to view any of these banks. Now this for the BA 100 is actually incorrect, because the BA 100 only includes the total aggregation and doesn't allow you to see the individual institutions, because that information is not publicly available. But if I change over to the version 1 of the dataset, which has been set up correctly, you will see now it's, gosh, okay, I've set myself up for a trap here. There should be a restriction on that data. But I was messing around with this earlier, and I must have changed something. Let's just have a look quickly.
It's Murphy's Law of demos.
Yeah.
Not that it really matters, because you can't, the underlying data isn't available. So yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, so it would be confusing though, I guess, you know, if you try to access the data that wasn't there. Ah, there we go. So you can see here on the version 1 of the BA 100, you can see for banks, there's additional restrictions that apply, and then you can see it's just in the code list, only the total banks is available. And that's fully defined. If we go to reporting constraints, you'll see that this is where that restriction has been set up, and you can see that it cross-references that particular data flow. Okay. So if we just go back to our category schemes, and then I just want to go look at a different data flow, specifically the economic accounts. And let's look at the national accounts 1.4. Okay, so if we view this data flow, I just want to demonstrate that you could have different providers for the same data, right? And these could be these views could be restricted. The degrees of freedom are infinite here, so you can lay out whatever restrictions of views on the data that you would like. Okay, great. So that shows the providers, and then all these things are organized. For example, you've got the data provider scheme here with your different. These are your allowable providers. So nothing is ad hoc, right? So everything is predefined and cross-referenced. And any data that goes into the system will be checked against a schema that validated against the registry, right? So you're not there's some safeguard on uploading or ingesting incorrect data. So yeah, I think that that pretty much covers what I wanted to show. So we're starting with the category screen, drilling down into the categories, which lead us to the data flows, which then in turn lead us to the different providers of the data and the underlying data structure definitions. And that's sort of the high-level overview of how the registry fits together. There are a lot of other complexities or features rather of the registry, and we can go into that if there are any questions.
Excellent. So I'll just quickly go back to my
There
slide.
is one question.
Okay.
JG asked, would it be possible to position SDMX in the context of FIBO, which is the financial industry business ontology?
I'm afraid I can't speak to that because I'm not familiar with FIBO, but the amount of flexibility that the information model and the standard allows for, I wouldn't be surprised.
Okay, so maybe just
yes.
to explain, JG, the FIBO is metadata only, and it talks about all of the banking or in the financial industry business entities. So that sort of SDMX structure with all the subject areas and things like that and elements like that, one could probably express when you build a time series of a concept, you could use SDMX to transport your data. Whereas the FIBO is more of your ontological structure that you can put into a knowledge graph, for example, but that probably won't work for a time series database. Okay. I think someone else was someone else wanting to contribute on the FIBO? I'm not sure if I heard, was it you, Mark? Okay. All yours, Don.
Okay, excellent. So just by way of summary then, from the perspective of a data manager, the key value proposition of EconData is that it centralizes internal and external economic data. And as we've described, it's really important to be able to have definitional consistency of the concepts that matter. But there are also a number of other key aspects of EconData that make it attractive given the features we've described. One is that you could have an instance on premise. You could also access it via the web. So that there are different ways of controlling how the platform could be or this type of system could be used. Then, as we've said, there's the ability to see what data is available via the registry. And then users can actually interact with the data using a variety of different tools. We haven't shown it today, but you can look at one of the previous videos, and we showed how you can use the R API to automate workflows. Then, in terms of what exactly the benefit is, we've outlined a couple of the key data management and governance benefits of an SDMX way of work. And one of the attractive features as well is that you can actually apply user level controls to specific data sets or series. Then we could talk a lot about the interoperability benefits and the benefits of having data available in a variety of different formats. And again, some of the earlier videos demonstrated that. Then in terms of where, there is a lot of benefit in being able to centralize availability of economic data. This enables users to have a single source of truth, even though the underlying data comes from disparate sources, and that is very important if you want to make sure that the processes that run off the data can be traced back to a specific vintage and specific data series. So it has really important governance and process implications. And then again, the availability of it from anywhere is very important, particularly in the kind of post-COVID world that we find ourselves in. The challenges that we've described are really difficult for large institutions to deal with, but we've shown just how easy being able to access these technologies that are being advanced by other institutions can help you deal with these difficult challenges. And one of the key benefits is the ability to actually enable users from different departments in an institution or across different institutions to collaborate responsibly using data. And then having the availability of a glossary of metadata and concepts is made very easy in this way of doing things, whereas it is incredibly difficult if it is done bottom up using alternative approaches. And then in terms of the when, the key benefit is being able to to know that the data that you're looking at is the latest data from a specific source. That's incredibly important, not just for users, but also from a governance perspective. And again, from a governance and process perspective, you can actually set up scheduled updating, and you can have, based on the publication schedules of data suppliers. In terms of the who, again, a very key attraction is the ability to have role-based access, governance authority, and data management authority and responsibility. And then the fact that data creators themselves could push data to the platform. So for example, if a user runs a model and the outputs from that model they may want to store centrally, or maybe they've added judgment to the model and they want to actually record what those judgments were, or they want to run analysis on the data like quality checks and they want to record those. These are all things that could be accommodated. And that really is what data as a service is all about. And again, they're very important governance benefits of the ability to actually have specific provision agreements. And then just lastly, in terms of the how, we've described the SDMX data model in a bit of detail today, and that it has several governance and process management attractive features. The EconData platform also allows one to actually look at usage statistics at individual level, but also there is a lot one could do under the SDMX framework to actually demonstrate the value associated with the statistics that are in the data sets And so we will be talking in the future sessions when we talk about data citizens and data professionals, and then ultimately data executives, but those kinds of analytics that actually demonstrate the value of specific series and the value of the system as a whole. And then lastly, Byron's spoken about some of the quality checks that are both implicit in the standard, but also that are enabled by the standard. Excellent, thank you.
Don, thank you very much. That was great. Any questions? JG, I know you were quite interested in the balance sheet last week. Are there things that this could help you in terms of bringing these different balance sheets through, or in this format? Or
I feel like my eyes, I wasn't familiar with the SDMX structure, so I feel like I need a little bit of time to even realize that it exists, number one. But I do appreciate the value proposition of having a level of assurance given to any time series elements, particularly if they find their way into a decision-making process. So if anything, what's this presentation has done for me is brought in a higher level of vigilance on the assurance process of the trending. And but I can't even link this to balance sheets at the moment, but really thank the guys for opening my eyes there. Appreciate it. Thank you.
so maybe just a comment from me, and then Don may be able to hand over. So one of the things I was thinking of is that EconData could be a data provider into your environment that would make certain balance sheets available to you. Again, it's depending on what you want to see on those balance sheets, so that you could be comparing the data from your customers to other balance sheets within the industry, totals or whatever that may be. JG.
Yeah, absolutely. The moment I saw Byron highlight some of the banking partners, and that data is coming from the receiver of revenue, I'm going, okay, I've got to imagine the data is public domain, and therefore if the data is here and trustable, then it's almost like there's an assured trend that can be used as the baseline. So actually what this is offering is it's a baseline option for a comparator. What I realized is then one has to have the similar level of vigilance in order to do trust a period-on-period comparison.
Yeah.
Because if EconData has been really particular to make sure that the assurance of the trend, if I'm comparing 2017 to their 2017, let's just make sure I've done a suitable level of work for comparison. So absolutely, I initially thought definitely this offers a not just a country baseline.
Yeah.
To come, and so I've actually reached out to Don already, because I'm going, shucks, there could well be collaborative opportunities here. So thank you again for the detailed presentation, guys.
Don, did I answer that correctly, Don?
Absolutely. So just to add one or two details, South Africa is blessed with really granular bank balance sheet information in the BA 900 regulatory form, which you can, if you create a user account on EconData, you can go and have a look. Thousands of lines of individual bank balance sheet items, and what EconData does is it takes all of that data that's publicly available and puts it at your fingertips. If you were to try and construct this and update it monthly, it'd be an enormous amount of work. Absolutely, I think that's one example of a use case for this kind of information.
Yeah. And I think that was a very important question from Tobias. He actually asked, is SDMX something one could use to enrich internal data with metadata? And Byron answered quickly, definitely. And so that is a scenario where we're seeing a lot of the SDMX namespace and attributes and metadata that are being applied to data sets to add that extra metadata to it. Byron, would you like to comment a little bit more on Tobias's question?
Yeah, so the information model and the registry is very flexible. So it can be, it doesn't really, it's not very opinionated on the implementation. So whatever your internal data implementation is, this can be layered on top of that in a sensible way. It's perhaps not appropriate for use with unstructured data. I don't think the standard has really dealt with that kind of data in a serious way. But any structured statistical data, it most certainly could be used to enrich that data with its model and its metadata capability.
Okay.
On competing standards, I think Howard, you would know more than I do.
Yeah, there's. I mean, I was just talking to someone today about Apache has got a few. Elation's got a few. There was a really nice web page that I looked at it saying the top 10 open metadata data catalog environments. So, guys, the stuff's all over the place. What I certainly like about the one that Don's talking about is that SDMX ISO standard. Just being able to move data backwards and forwards with the metadata and the process transformations happening. I think there's lots of power, but I really haven't looked at the others, but there's a lot of stuff happening in the market at the moment.
Thanks, everyone.
Great.
Thanks. I'm excited by this. I think there's real potential. I hope to hear someone use the words SDMX, the letters, in Canada that I come across.
Okay.
Can't have South Africa innovating. That won't do.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for the challenge. We'll get there one day.
Or maybe we should establish a Canadian Canadian firm then.
Excellent. Any other questions? Manj, anything from your side? Is there anything you'd like to comment on?
No, guys, I think that was so interesting, eye-opening. Hey, so thank you very much.
Excellent.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Thanks, Don.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks for the prep.
Cheers.
Bye.
Cheers. Turn up that fan, Rousseau. Getting hot. Excellent.
Okay, Howard, thanks a lot. I'm
Thank you very
off.
much.
I'll see you next time.
It was good. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Okay, bye-bye.
Just